They say beginnings are supposed to feel hopeful, fresh, clean. But that morning, the one that was supposed to mark a new chapter in my life, started with this weird, crawling tension I couldn't shake off. I was 26, still living with my mom and her husband Henry in a quiet little town tucked into the Colorado foothills. It wasn't exactly how I'd pictured post-college life going, but after graduating with a marketing degree and scraping by with freelance gigs, I was finally getting a shot at something real. A job interview at Summit Adventures, one of the top outdoor gear companies in the country. This was the one I'd had my eyes on since my sophomore year. I woke up that morning already feeling the buzz of nerves, part excitement, part dread. I wanted this job so badly it almost hurt. I threw on a button-down I'd ironed the night before and made my way to the kitchen. My mom was already at work, she always left early for her shift at the medical clinic, but Henry was still around. That was a surprise in itself. Usually he was out by 6, off to some construction site or another. But there he was, leaning against the counter, holding 2 steaming mugs like some kind of sitcom dad. "Big day," he said, offering one to me. I took it, eyeing the mug like it might bite. "Thanks. Coffee helps with nerves," he added with a smirk. "So I hear." The gesture seemed innocent, but Henry never made coffee for me. Ever. In fact, our relationship was pretty transactional. I stayed out of his way, he stayed out of mine. That was the unspoken agreement. So for him to be standing there, all smiles and caffeine, just felt off. Still, I took a sip. And instantly regretted it. There was something wrong with it, off-putting. The bitterness I could handle. But underneath that was this weird, metallic aftertaste. Like licking a coin. My stomach turned. I tried not to let it show on my face, but I swear Henry noticed. His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Tastes okay?" he asked. "Yeah, just, strong," I said, forcing a swallow. I held on to the mug, mostly out of politeness, but I couldn't bring myself to take another sip. It sat heavy in my hands while I grabbed my bag and jacket, thanking him again and heading out the door. I should have trusted my gut then. But I didn't. Not yet. On the drive to Boulder, the tension I'd felt earlier didn't let up. I kept replaying the morning in my head. The way Henry had stood there, almost too casual. The taste of that coffee. The fact that he'd never done anything remotely fatherly like that in all the years he'd been around. I knew something was up. I just didn't know what. And to be honest, maybe I didn't want to know. Henry had been in my life since I was 12. I remember being happy for my mom when she met him. Back then, he was charming in that small town, flannel shirt kind of way. My real dad had bailed when I was a toddler, so having a dad around was new. For a while, I bought into it. He taught me how to change a tire, took me fishing once or twice. But it didn't last. By the time I was in high school, it was clear Henry didn't really care for me. Not in a way that mattered. He was a hands-on guy, a contractor who believed in hard labor, and he never missed a chance to say things like, "Real men build stuff with their hands," whenever I mentioned anything about college or marketing or, God forbid, working a desk job. Every time I showed him a project or shared a freelance win, he'd shrug it off. "Doesn't seem like real work," he'd say. Or worse, "That kind of stuff won't get you far in the real world." It got under my skin more than I cared to admit. Especially because my mom always seemed to nod along, like she was tired of playing referee. I think she just wanted peace in the house. But what Henry never seemed to understand, or maybe he understood too well, was that I wasn't trying to impress him. I just wanted a life that felt like mine. The Summit Adventures interview was supposed to be that first step. A company that actually aligned with what I cared about: adventure, storytelling, strategy. They were known for their brand work, how they blended marketing with real, outdoorsy grit. It wasn't just a job, it was the kind of place I could build a career. I stopped at a gas station halfway through the drive, my stomach still queasy from that awful coffee. I dumped the rest of it in the trash and bought a new cup. As I stood there waiting for it to fill, I stared at the gas station's grimy floor tiles and had this weird realization. That morning wasn't just uncomfortable. It was calculated. Why would Henry go out of his way to make coffee for me on that day, of all days? Why then? I tried to shake it off. I had to focus. The interview was what mattered. But something inside me whispered, this isn't just about coffee. I didn't know it then, but that sip, the taste, the timing, was the start of something I couldn't ignore. Something darker. If I'm being honest, I never liked calling Henry my stepdad. It felt too official, too generous. To me, he was just Henry, Mom's second husband who happened to live under the same roof. He came into our lives like a whirlwind when I was 12. One minute it was just me and Mom, figuring things out, and the next, this broad-shouldered guy with sun-leathered skin and loud opinions was sitting at our dinner table like he owned the place. At first, I was kind of okay with it. He made my mom smile again. She deserved that. And back then, I think I was just happy that someone wanted to be part of our lives. We'd never had much, and Henry came in with steady work, a truck that didn't break down, and a freezer full of steaks. For a while, things felt secure. But security has a price, I guess. And for me, it came in the form of disapproval, layered so subtly at first, I didn't even notice it. I started picking up on it in high school. The way he'd scoff whenever I stayed in to finish a paper instead of helping him with yard work. How he'd make jokes about me being too soft or one of those screen kids. At first, I tried brushing it off, chalking it up to a generation gap or maybe just some warped version of tough love. But the older I got, the clearer it became, he didn't respect me. He never said it outright. Henry wasn't that kind of guy. But it showed in the way he talked over me at dinner, in the passive-aggressive remarks about my fake marketing degree, in the way he'd only ever call my work projects instead of what it actually was, real freelance contracts, with real clients. The older I got, the more it felt like he saw me as a rival. Not in a competitive, healthy way. No, it was more like he thought I was a threat. I wasn't trying to replace him, but there was this unspoken battle between us, for control, for validation, maybe even for my mom's attention. And I hated that I still lived in that house. It wasn't like I wanted to. After college, I applied to jobs like crazy. But entry-level marketing work? It's brutal. Half the listings want 2 years of experience for a junior position, and the other half are unpaid internships disguised as real opportunities. I took on gig work where I could, social campaigns for local brands, content calendars, the occasional logo redesign, but nothing that could pay rent in Boulder or Denver. So yeah, I stayed. And every day I stayed, I felt like Henry counted it as a win. I remember one morning last fall, probably October, when I was trying to prep for a virtual interview with a company out in Seattle. I had my laptop open, my notes ready, and I was mid-rehearsing my pitch when the Wi-Fi cut out. Just gone. Dead. I reset the router twice, then checked the modem, and finally ran out to the garage where Henry was hammering away at something. He didn't even look up when I asked about it. Storm knocked it out, he said. It's sunny. Yeah, well. Can't trust that cheap router. Told your mom to upgrade it months ago. Thing is, he'd never cared about the Wi-Fi before. And we didn't have any storm. It felt too convenient. My gut told me something was off, but what was I supposed to do? Accuse him of sabotaging my internet? That wasn't the only weird thing. My alarm clock, which had always been reliable, started going haywire, especially on mornings when I had interviews or client calls. It would blink 12 o'clock like it had reset overnight. And once, my laptop wouldn't boot up because the charger had mysteriously gone missing. I found it 2 days later behind the dryer. I hadn't been in the laundry room in a week. Little things, but they added up. One night, when I was helping Mom unload groceries, I found her outside, talking to Henry in hushed tones. The second they saw me, they stopped. She smiled like everything was fine, but Henry just gave me this look, like he was calculating something. That look stayed with me. It got to the point where I started keeping backups of all my files in the cloud and stored sensitive stuff on a flash drive I wore around my neck like some kind of dorky marketing dog tag. Every time I had something important, whether it was a pitch, a portfolio piece, or a follow-up email, I triple-checked it, just in case. It sounds paranoid, right? I felt paranoid. I even started writing off my gut feelings as stress, until I saw what was in Henry's truck. It was late, maybe midnight. I'd just come back from a last-minute freelance consult at a local brewery. I parked behind his truck and noticed the cab light was on. When I peeked inside, I saw a small bottle rolling around the passenger floor. I opened the door and picked it up. No label. No markings. Just a dark amber bottle with a black cap and a faint chemical smell. I didn't say anything to Mom or Henry. Not then. I didn't know what I was dealing with, and I didn't want to sound like I was accusing him of something without proof. But from that night on, I kept a mental note of every strange thing that happened. By the time the Summit Adventures interview rolled around, I was already running on nerves. But that coffee. That was the thing that tipped the scales. I didn't know if I was being drugged or just messed with, but something had shifted. It wasn't just tension anymore. It was war. Living with someone you don't trust is like holding your breath in your own home. You go through the motions, you smile when you have to, but underneath it all, there's this quiet, pulsing dread. That's what it felt like with Henry. I was walking through familiar rooms that somehow felt foreign, like the air had changed and I was the only one who noticed. After the morning with the coffee, I started paying closer attention. Really watching. And once I did, I couldn't unsee it. It began with small things. Things I could have easily written off, maybe even did, at first. My alarm didn't go off the morning I had a virtual interview. I'd double-checked it the night before, even tested it. But somehow, it reset overnight. Blamed it on the power flickering, though I couldn't remember seeing the clocks blink in any other room. Then my laptop started acting weird. Files I had organized into clear folders were suddenly scattered. One of my pitch decks had been renamed entirely, and another had been replaced with a much older version I hadn't touched in weeks. One time, I tried opening a presentation I had worked on for days, and it was corrupted, completely unusable. I asked my mom if she'd been on my computer. She looked genuinely confused and said she wouldn't even know how. I believed her. But there weren't a lot of other options in that house. That's when I started noticing the Wi-Fi issues. At first, it just seemed like bad luck, cutting out right before a Zoom call or freezing while I uploaded a file. But one afternoon, right before a meeting with a potential client, the internet dropped completely. No warning. I rushed to reset the router and found it had been unplugged. Not tripped, not glitched, unplugged. The router sits behind the living room TV. And the only person who'd been home besides me? Henry. I didn't accuse him. I couldn't, not yet. But the pattern was forming. Slowly, steadily. Things kept disappearing. My charger went missing for 3 days, only to reappear under the laundry basket in the garage. My USB drive, one I always kept in my backpack, was somehow in the glove compartment of Henry's truck. When I asked if he'd seen it, he just shrugged and said, "You kids lose stuff all the time." That word, kids, clenched something in me. I'm 26. I pay rent. I cook for myself. I'm trying to build a life. But to him, I was still the teenage inconvenience who hadn't moved out yet. And maybe that's what this was all about. The more I thought about it, the more it made a kind of sick sense. Henry wasn't just annoyed by me, he saw me as competition. Not for money or space, but for control. For influence. For my mom's attention. And maybe, just maybe, watching me struggle gave him a sense of satisfaction. Like I was proving him right. Like he could say, "See? Told you that marketing crap wouldn't go anywhere." It was petty. It was passive. But it was calculated. The breaking point came late one night when I borrowed Henry's truck. I was helping a friend move and needed the extra cargo space. He tossed me the keys without hesitation, which surprised me. He's usually weirdly territorial about that truck. As I was strapping down a box in the back seat, I noticed something on the floor, a small, amber pill bottle with no label. It had rolled halfway under the seat. I picked it up, and the cap clicked open easily. It was empty, but the inside still had that faint, sharp chemical smell, one I instantly recognized from the coffee. I didn't ask. I didn't tell anyone. I just kept it. Later that night, I sat on my bed with the bottle in my hand, staring at it under the glow of my desk lamp. My pulse was loud in my ears. My thoughts were louder. Was this what he'd been putting in my coffee? Was that what made me feel so off, slow, foggy, nauseous, on days that were supposed to matter most? And if that was true, what else had he done? It was like staring into the mouth of a tunnel you didn't know you were walking through. Everything behind me suddenly made more sense. The broken routines. The quiet failures. The subtle way things kept falling apart when they needed to come together. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't being dramatic. Someone had been pushing me off track, inch by inch. And now, I had something real. Something solid. The next time Henry tried to help, I'd be ready. The morning of the interview started quiet, too quiet. I didn't sleep much the night before. My mind kept drifting back to that unmarked pill bottle. I'd stashed it in the back of my sock drawer, like I was afraid it might explode if left out in the open. Something about it just wouldn't let me rest. It hovered in the back of my mind, whispering questions I didn't want to answer. Was Henry drugging me? I wasn't ready to say it out loud. But I couldn't rule it out either. I got up early that day, way before my alarm, and ran through my routine with mechanical focus. Shower, shave, oatmeal. I put on my cleanest button-up, double-checked my portfolio, rehearsed a few key lines from my pitch. I tried to channel that nervous energy into preparation, but the tension lingered in my chest like smoke. At 7:45, I walked into the kitchen to grab my backpack and keys. Henry was already there. Waiting. He stood by the coffee pot like he'd been expecting me. Mug in hand, that same too casual smile on his face. "Big day," he said, mirroring the exact tone he'd used last time. "Got your coffee right here." He extended the mug toward me like a peace offering. Except it didn't feel peaceful. It felt staged. Rehearsed. Just like before. I took the mug, forcing a tight smile. "Thanks." But my gut was screaming. I brought it to my lips and took a small sip, enough to taste, not enough to swallow. And there it was again. That same bitter metal taste. Subtle, but unmistakable. Like someone had stirred in a splash of battery acid. I held the mug steady in my hands, careful not to react. He was watching me. "You seem tense," he said. I faked a chuckle. "Yeah, well, big opportunity. Kind of a make-or-break thing." He nodded, sipped from his own cup, and turned back toward the sink. But I caught it, just for a second, his eyes flicking toward me, checking. Measuring. Something in that look flipped a switch in my brain. All the moments I tried to explain away, the corrupted files, the alarm malfunctions, the missing charger, the Wi-Fi outages, they came rushing back, each one like a puzzle piece clicking into place. And at the center of it all was Henry. I walked out of the house a minute later, coffee in hand, heart pounding like a drum. I didn't dare take another sip. I didn't even want to hold the thing anymore. As soon as I reached the gas station on the corner, I dumped it into the trash with shaking hands and bought a fresh cup. The clerk gave me a weird look. "Rough morning?" "Something like that," I muttered, my voice distant. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, trying to slow my breathing. My mind was spinning in 1,000 directions, but one thing was crystal clear now. Henry didn't just disapprove of my career. He was actively trying to ruin it. And more than that, he might have been trying to hurt me. The signs were all there. He only ever got involved when I had something important on the line. Every act of help came laced with consequences. And now this coffee, this strange ritual he'd suddenly adopted, it wasn't kindness. It was a threat disguised as concern. A message: "I'm watching. I can reach you whenever I want." I thought about confronting him. About storming back into the kitchen and throwing the mug across the room. About demanding answers, screaming accusations. But what would that prove? He'd just smile. Deny everything. Say I was being paranoid. Maybe even convince my mom that I was cracking under pressure. And honestly, after the last few months, she might have believed him. He was good at that, playing the calm, rational husband while I looked like the ungrateful, overly sensitive man-child who couldn't hack it in the real world. No. I needed proof. I needed strategy. So I made a silent promise to myself right then and there, sitting in that parking lot with my new coffee and a heart full of fire. If Henry wanted to play games, I'd play them better. But first, I had an interview to nail. And I wasn't going to let him take that from me. I pulled into the Summit Adventures parking lot with a tightness in my chest that had nothing to do with the interview. My hands still trembled from everything that morning, the taste of that coffee, the memory of Henry's stare, the feeling that I'd been a pawn in some weird, slow-burning psychological chess match. But I forced it all down. I had to. This was my shot. My shot to step out of the shadow of that house, of Henry, of all of it. The Summit Adventures building was everything I imagined it would be: glass, exposed wood beams, huge photos of backpackers and climbers in places I could only dream of. I stood in the lobby trying to steady my breath while the receptionist smiled at me like it was just another Tuesday. But to me, it felt like I'd made it to base camp on the side of Everest. The interview went better than I could have imagined. They asked about my freelance work, and I laid it all out: campaigns I'd designed, metrics I'd improved, how I'd positioned brands to stand out in saturated markets. I talked about authenticity in outdoor branding, about social trends and eco-conscious messaging, and somehow, I felt like I belonged there. Every nod from the panel felt like oxygen. Every interesting point was fuel. By the end, I could see it in their eyes: they weren't just impressed. They were interested. As I walked out of that office, the sun hit different. I felt lighter. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't second-guessing myself. I was proud. That pride lasted until I pulled into the driveway back home. The truck was in the garage, but something was off. The curtains in the living room were drawn shut, which was weird for midday. As I stepped inside, I was met with the sharp, acidic smell of bleach. The kitchen lights were dimmed, and everything was quiet, too quiet. Then I saw him. Henry was slumped on the couch, still wearing his work boots, his face pale and clammy. His breathing was shallow, and a cold sweat clung to his forehead. On the coffee table in front of him was the same mug he'd handed me that morning. Empty. He looked up at me, startled, almost dazed. "Food poisoning," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "Must have been something I ate." But his eyes said something else. Panic. Guilt. And suddenly I knew. He'd made us both the same coffee that morning. Probably used whatever was in that unmarked pill bottle. Maybe it was supposed to dull my focus, make me sluggish for the interview. But for some reason, miscalculation, bad timing, who knows, he'd taken a bigger hit than I did. And now here he was, sitting in the aftermath of his own plan. I didn't say anything. Not at first. I just stood there, staring at him, letting the silence do the talking. He looked like a man unraveling in real time. You should go to urgent care, I said eventually, my voice calm. Almost too calm. He blinked at me. It's just a bug. I nodded slowly. Right. Weird coincidence, though. Getting sick right after that coffee. He looked away. I didn't push it. I didn't need to. For the first time, I had leverage, not a shouting match, not a hunch, but actual leverage. If he really had been trying to sabotage me, then whatever he'd used had clearly turned on him. And whether it was guilt, karma, or just a cosmic slap in the face, it didn't matter. It was his undoing, not mine. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on my bed with the lights off, holding the flash drive in my hand like it was some kind of talisman. I kept thinking back to the look on Henry's face, how he couldn't meet my eyes. How small he looked. I didn't confront him. Not directly. I didn't need fireworks or a dramatic speech. What I needed was out. And after today, I knew exactly how close I was to getting there. The next morning, I emailed Summit Adventures to follow up, and within hours, I got the message I'd been dreaming of for years. They wanted to hire me.